It's one of the longest, loudest arguments in modern history. A fight that outlived revolutions, toppled empires, bankrupted superpowers, and split the world in half. For over a century, capitalism and socialism weren't just economic theories. They were battle lines, and behind every patriotic speech, every worker uprising, every recession, and every proxy war, this debate shaped the world we live in. But here's the part: no ideology influencer ever mentions. Neither system worked the way the textbooks promised. Not once, not anywhere. And when the pressure hit, war, famine, inflation, collapse, the truth showed itself with brutal clarity. Welcome to the Finance Folio, where money, power, and history collide. And nothing is ever as simple as it looks. The story begins long before anyone uttered the words capitalism or socialism. For most of human history, the economy wasn't really an economy at all. It was survival. Monarchs claimed divine right. Landlords owned almost everything. Peasants produced just enough to avoid starving. Progress moved slower than glaciers. For thousands of years, human life was a zero-sum game. If someone rose, someone else fell. Wealth came from land, labor, and war. Productivity barely grew, and the idea that ordinary people might grow rich through trade or innovation would have sounded like madness. Then the Industrial Revolution blew the world open. Britain, in the late 1700s, was a pressure cooker of coal, iron, capital, and restless ambition. Machines replaced muscle, factories replaced workshops, and a new kind of power emerged. The power of private capital. For the first time, individuals could invest, risk, and own at a scale previously reserved for kings. Productivity exploded. Wages rose for some, misery deepened for others, and inequality widened faster than any society had ever experienced. Pollution choked cities. Children worked 12-hour shifts. Slums bred disease, but no matter how ugly it was, one fact was undeniable. Capitalism produced more goods, more wealth, more speed than the world had ever seen. This was the moment when socialism was born, not as a utopian dream, but as a desperate reaction to industrial capitalism's brutality. By the mid-1800s, writers like Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels looked at the smokestacks and the worker riots. They saw factory floors stained with sweat and blood and concluded that the system itself was the crime. They saw capitalist wealth as stolen labor, extraction disguised as opportunity. They argued that if workers collectively owned the factories, if the profits were shared, if production served human need rather than private gain, society would finally become fair. No more exploitation, no more cycles of boom and bust, just rational planning and equal dignity. It sounded clean, elegant, moral, and for millions of people living beneath the gears of early capitalism, it sounded like justice. But theory is one thing, real life is another. The first time the world seriously attempted socialism on a national scale, it wasn't in a classroom. It was in the ashes of an empire. After the 1917 Russian Revolution, Lenin inherited a country that was starving, illiterate, and backward. The Tsar was dead. The old elite fled or were executed. And suddenly a vast territory with 150 million people needed a new operating system. So the Soviets built one: state ownership of land, factories, banks, and resources. Prices were set by bureaucrats. Production targets replaced profit motives. Private business was wiped out. In theory, it should have created perfect equality and efficiency. In practice, it created chaos. Without market prices, planners didn't know what people wanted or how much to produce. Without competition, factories didn't innovate. Without personal reward, workers had no reason to exceed the minimum. Shortages became normal. Lines became culture. And agriculture, the backbone of the Russian economy, collapsed into famine. Lenin eventually retreated, allowing limited private trade just to keep the country alive. Yet something strange happened. Despite its failures, socialism remained seductive, because capitalism wasn't exactly looking good either. By the early 20th century, capitalism had delivered immense growth, but also wild instability. Speculation ran rampant. Trusts dominated industries. The wealthy lived like modern royalty while millions scraped by. The system was efficient at creating wealth, but terrible at distributing it. This imbalance detonated in 1929 when the US stock market imploded and capitalism suffered its most catastrophic failure. The Great Depression wasn't a recession. It was a global economic heart attack. Banks collapsed. Unemployment hit 25%. Entire countries saw their financial systems wiped out. For millions of observers, capitalism looked not just flawed, but fatal. So, by the 1930s, the world faced an uncomfortable truth. Neither system worked as advertised. Socialism promised equality but delivered scarcity. Capitalism promised prosperity but delivered collapse. And then came a moment that changed everything. World War II. The war forced every major economy to test its system under maximum pressure. The Soviet Union mobilized its entire population with terrifying speed and discipline. State control allowed it to redirect all resources toward survival. Meanwhile, capitalist nations like the United States transformed into industrial supermachines, proving just how powerful private innovation could be when backed by national coordination. When the war ended, the scoreboard wasn't ideological anymore. It was GDP, infrastructure, growth, and living standards. From 1945 to 1991, the world became a laboratory. On one side, the Soviet bloc, central planning, state control, suppressed markets. On the other, the United States and its allies, regulated capitalism, private enterprise, but with safety nets. This was the real experiment, millions of people living the consequences. In the Soviet Union, early decades brought rapid industrialization, but beneath the surface, the system was cracking. Without price signals, the economy drifted into absurd inefficiency. A country that could build rockets couldn't produce decent refrigerators. Capitalism, meanwhile, adapted. Governments introduced regulation, antitrust laws, and social security. Capitalism didn't become fair, but it became survivable. It learned from its mistakes, and that adaptability became its ultimate weapon. By the 1980s, the gap was undeniable. Western living standards surged while the Soviet economy stalled. The Soviet Union was defeated by empty shelves, broken incentives, and an economy that could no longer keep up. While the Cold War ended, the economic contradictions didn't. By the 1990s and 2000s, capitalism evolved again into something no 19th century theorist could have predicted. Inequality soared again, on a scale reminiscent of the Gilded Age. The 2008 financial crisis hit like a déjà vu, reminder that capitalism's instability never really disappeared. Today, every major economy is a hybrid blend of markets and state power, incentives and protections. Human nature doesn't disappear under socialism or capitalism. It just expresses itself differently. The real question isn't which system is better. It's which system has the best mechanisms to restrain power and reward useful behavior. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. History has the answers. I'll show you where to look.